My name's Justine Dandy and I'm from Edith Cowan University in Perth, Western Australia. I'm going to give you a small snapshot of some work that we're doing on behavioural indicators of acculturation, looking in particular at alcohol and drug use patterns, attitudes and behaviours, and also psychological well-being among young people from migrant and refugee backgrounds. And by young people, I mean those aged 16 to 25, and we're looking at first and second generation migrants in Western Australia. We were interested in alcohol use as a behavioural measure rather than the conventional scales of heritage cultural maintenance or adoption of local cultural norms, values and behaviours, but instead actually looking at what young people do. And I'm going to present very much a micro level perspective on this because it's work in progress, but in particular I wanted to focus on the methodology that we used to get young people involved in the research. As you may know, drinking is an Australian cultural norm, drinking socially in particular, drinking alcohol. And here we have a picture of former Prime Minister Bob Hawke, who held a world record for drinking a yard glass of beer. He is also in that photo accompanied by former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. Bob Hawke was, incidentally, the most popular Australian Prime Minister ever. So I think that says something. So Australians like to drink. They drink a lot of alcohol and they drink frequently, and it usually accompanies every social activity in Australian life. These are our norms. There are health consequences of this, of course, and Australia also has the dubious honour of leading the world for alcohol-related hospital admissions. And I guess because of that health focus, we've been funded by the WA Health Promotion Foundation, or Healthway, to do this research. And by we, I mean I'm working with this fabulous team of people, including Caroline Sung Wong from the University of Canberra, Amanda George, also University of Canberra, Vilma Palacios from North Metro Health in WA, and Byron Zamboanga from the University of Arkansas. In terms of our methodology, we had to take a different approach because we knew it would be difficult to get young people to participate in the study. It's hard to get young people to participate in research anyway, but we were going to talk about a sensitive topic. We were going to touch on illegal behaviours and behaviours that are really frowned upon in many of these migrant communities in Australia. So we took a fairly unusual path in many ways. We set up an advisory group who consist of members, people who work in the area, either in multicultural service provision or as in youth advocacy. And they helped us identify young people from the migrant communities who had the potential to be developed as, I guess, research assistants. So we had 9 of these young people, all from different ethnic backgrounds. We provided them with training in research ethics and integrity and in focus group facilitation. And then we asked them to recruit a sample, each of them a focus group, a group of young people from their migrant background, their ethno-specific background, to participate in a focus group. They had criteria they had to meet in terms of the sample, and they were not to recruit members of their own family or close friends or family members together in the one group. So we let them organise and they co-facilitated the focus groups. Most of these focus groups took place on the weekends and were in a community location away from the university, which might have been a bit off-putting, the university, but also they were away from where these young people lived in most cases, not close by. And this was to protect their confidentiality. And it was clear that for many in those groups, in the past, young people who did have, who had confessed to having drug and alcohol issues had often been marginalised from their communities. So it's really important to protect the confidentiality of the information. And we also provided catering and paid the participants a small amount for their involvement. It was a lot of weekend work, but it was very successful, I have to say. These are just some quotes from the survey, from the focus groups. We are still analysing the data, so this is really just a kind of sample of some of the things young people said. It was clear that the young people recognised the ubiquity of drinking in Australian culture. They identified it as normal and normalised and what you did when you went out with friends. And they also recognised that it was something that people were introduced or initiated into from a young age, usually in their teens. Some of them described pressures they'd experienced to drink alcohol, and again, usually during their teens, before the age of 18 though. And some also described the pressure to fit in and wanting to be accepted, particularly coming from a different country whose English is perhaps not so good. And so it was really a transition to being like other young Australians. It was part of socialising, and young people described drinking to excess, binge drinking, particularly on weekends. So those were just a few examples. We did have 9 focus groups with between sort of an hour to 2.5 hours of conversation with them, and they were very revealing and rich conversations. So it's a small sample of 55 young people, but actually that's quite large for a qualitative data set. There's a lot of data in those focus group transcripts. So we have 55 young people. They came from a range of backgrounds. There were 9 focus groups, and in general, those groups were ethno-specific. So we had young people from Chinese, Indian, South Sudanese, Sri Lankan, Ethiopian, Eritrean, from Iraq, from Iran, from Afghanistan, also Chin Burmese and Karen Burmese backgrounds. The groups tended to be mixed in gender, so had young men and young women, and ranged in age from 16 to 29. And the groups ranged in size from 4 to 9 people. So our strategy, our approach in getting the young people to recruit was very successful in many ways. The conversations were rich and quite honest and open, and the young people expressed gratitude for having the opportunity to speak about these issues in a confidential, protected environment. We also gave something back to the community by developing the leaders, by providing them with skills and training in research and also in focus group facilitation. And this is an important part of working in those communities, not just taking, but also giving something back. And this, of course, assists in community capacity building. On the downside, the groups are very diverse, or the sample's very diverse, and we may have sampled young people who tended not to be engaging in quite so many risky behaviours, although there was definitely drinking and a small amount of drug taking going on. And that diversity perhaps is a disadvantage, although in many ways that represents the diversity of multicultural or culturally plural Australia. So that's the nature of the state of things. To this, we are adding interviews with health service providers and also statistics from health department data in terms of young people's alcohol-related hospital admissions, service utilisation, and so on. So we're adding other data to that process, to our data set. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to find out more information, there is my email address, and as is my wont with these presentations, a local native Western Australian animal.